There was a phase in my life where I found myself glued to my phone, not because I was busy or productive, but because I was waiting for her to reply to a message I'd rewritten 5 times. I'd send something as harmless as, "Hey, how was your day?" and then sit there, quietly hoping it would somehow stir something inside her. But it rarely did. What came back, if anything came at all, was a dry sentence, a single emoji, or worse, complete silence. And with every unanswered text, I wasn't just losing her attention. I was losing my center. At the time, I thought I was being thoughtful, respectful, even charming in a subtle way. But the truth was harder to swallow. I wasn't leading the conversation, I was following. I wasn't building attraction, I was leaking neediness. And women don't respond to need. They respond to power, to certainty, to the quiet presence of a man who knows who he is and doesn't need her reply to validate that. It took me longer than I'd like to admit, but once I stopped trying to impress with the right words and started focusing on how to shape the emotional space between us, everything began to shift. I learned that texting, when done with clarity and intention, isn't just communication, it's leadership. It's the invisible frame that defines who you are and what she feels when she hears from you. This is what we explore here at Stoic Advice for Men. Not tactics, but transformation. If you're ready to stop chasing and start influencing, you're in the right place. Subscribe, listen closely, and let's begin the real work. One of the first shifts I made was learning to stop over-delivering. I used to think that the more I shared, the more connected we'd feel. I'd write long messages, explain my day in detail, even try to be funny or clever. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I was giving her closure, and in doing so, I was giving her a reason to move on from the interaction. Every text I sent was like a perfectly wrapped gift. Opened, admired, and then forgotten. But then I discovered something most men never do. It's not the full story that keeps a woman intrigued. It's the gap in the story. The moment you leave something unsaid, something incomplete, her mind doesn't just move on. It loops. That's not poetry, it's psychology. It's called the Zeigarnik effect. And once you understand how it works, you'll never look at texting the same way again. Instead of texting, you won't believe what just happened at work. And then dumping the entire tale, I'd say, you won't believe what just happened at work. But I'll tell you later. That small pause, that intentional gap, it shifts everything. Now she's thinking about it. Now she's waiting for the rest. And suddenly, it's not me trying to hold her attention. It's her coming back to find the missing piece. This isn't manipulation. It's structure. It's the difference between telling her a story and inviting her into it. And the power of this approach doesn't end with texting. In conversation, on dates, even in how you describe your lifestyle, the same principle applies. The less you explain, the more she leans in. If she asks, "So what do you do for fun?" I don't list hobbies like I'm filling out a dating profile. I just smile and say, "It's hard to explain. You'd have to see it." Because here's what I've learned. When you always make yourself easy to figure out, you become easy to forget. But when you give just enough to spark curiosity and then stop, you become a question she can't quite answer. And that's exactly the point. A woman's mind doesn't chase clarity. It chases mystery. And the man who knows how to create That space, the strategic gap, never has to beg for attention. Once I started using this, everything flipped. No more forced replies. No more dry energy. I wasn't just another guy in her inbox, I became the one. She couldn't stop thinking about Dot, so if you're still sending texts that tie everything up with a neat little bow, consider this. The most powerful stories don't end. They pause. And in that pause, she comes looking for more. Once I understood how to create psychological gaps, I began noticing another pattern, one that runs far deeper than curiosity. It's the pattern of emotional rhythm. And most men never master it because they're too busy being consistent, too safe, too available. I used to think consistency was a virtue in texting, always replying quickly, always being kind, always showing interest. But what I didn't see was that consistency, without contrast, becomes monotony. And monotony, in the world of attraction, is slow death. Women don't get addicted to predictability. They get addicted to unpredictability that feels intentional. They're drawn to a man who can lead them through emotional landscapes, not just emotional comfort. Think of your favorite movie. It doesn't keep you engaged by being one note. It grips you because it shifts from calm to intense, from light to dark, from playful to serious. That contrast isn't chaos, it's designed so. I stopped texting like a nice guy. I stopped sending good morning messages every single day like some programmed assistant. Instead, I became more like a rhythm, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, sometimes playful, sometimes quiet, but always grounded, always aware of the emotional texture I was creating. If she said she loved something basic like sushi, I wouldn't just echo it. I'd tease her. Sushi? That's cute. I had you figured for someone a little more daring. I wasn't insulting her. I was inviting her into emotional play, giving her something to push back against. And that tension? That's the spark most men are too afraid to touch. Other times, instead of saying, "I miss you," I'd say something like, "I walked past that bookstore we talked about. The one that smells like old paper and espresso. And for a second, I swear I could smell your perfume." Now I'm not just sending a message, I'm pulling her into a memory, a moment, a feeling. And that kind of emotional contrast, it doesn't just make her reply, it makes her feel. Here's the truth. I don't text to impress anymore. I text to provoke presence, to make her feel like she's in the room with me, whether I'm being playful, quiet, or unapologetically distant. Stoicism taught me that emotional control isn't about being flat, it's about being intentional. It's knowing when to stir the water and when to let it settle. And when you learn how to use emotional contrast with clarity, you'll notice something remarkable. She doesn't just check her phone. She waits for it, because in a world where most men send texts that feel like background noise, you become the signal her heart can't ignore. There came a point when I realized I was giving too much to someone who was offering too little. It wasn't just about the content of my messages, it was the pace, the energy, the way I responded within seconds to texts that took hours to arrive. And the worst part? I wasn't even aware I was doing it. I thought I was being communicative, consistent, present. But what I was really doing was chasing Dot. It wasn't until I stopped rewarding indifference with enthusiasm that everything began to shift. The moment I stopped replying instantly to her delayed messages was the moment she began responding faster. The moment I broke the pattern of always being available was the moment she began wondering where I'd gone. That's when I discovered what I now call the law of less. It's simple. The less you give away freely, the more value it carries. And nowhere is this truer than in texting. Most men, when they sense a woman pulling back, instinctively lean in harder. They double text. They send longer replies. They inject more warmth, more effort, more interest, hoping to revive something that's already slipping through their fingers. But what they don't realize is that this imbalance only deepens the distance. When one person gives more while the other gives less, attraction dies. Not slowly, but immediately. So I did the opposite. I mirrored. If she took 4 hours to reply, I took 6. If she sent short, disengaged messages, I responded with even shorter ones, or not at all. Not out of pettiness, not as a game, but because I refused to let my energy be a reward for apathy. And something fascinating happened. Her texts became longer, warmer, more curious. She started reaching out first. She began trying to earn my attention rather than simply receiving it. What I was using, whether I knew the name for it or not, was intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological principle that makes people addicted to slot machines. When the reward becomes unpredictable, the craving intensifies. And when a man no longer gives his presence predictably, it becomes something she starts to pursue. But here's what most men miss. This only works when you truly mean it. You cannot fake disinterest if your emotions are still entangled. You have to genuinely reclaim your time, your focus, your frame. Otherwise, she sensed the performance, and nothing kills attraction faster than need dressed up as detachment. The law of less isn't about silence for the sake of silence. It's about presence used strategically. It's about knowing that your words carry more weight when they're not handed out like candy to someone who's stopped appreciating the taste. And once you master this, once your silence becomes sacred, she doesn't just notice you. She begins to miss you. You can keep doing what most men do, waking up every morning, sending that polite good morning text like clockwork, hoping it somehow keeps her interested, hoping consistency will make up for the lack of connection. You can keep offering your presence like a free refill, endlessly available, endlessly overlooked. But if you've made it this far, some part of you knows that something has to change. You don't need more words. You need more weight behind the words you choose. Because, in the end, attraction doesn't grow in the light of constant exposure. It sharpens in the shadow of uncertainty. What draws her in isn't your effort, it's your gravity. Your ability to hold presence without begging for attention. That's what turns a man from forgettable to unforgettable. So the choice is yours. Keep playing the polite, predictable role, or learn to step back, to create tension, to let her wonder not just what you're thinking, but who you really are. If you're ready to master more than texting, if you're ready to understand female psychology through the lens of timeless, Stoic clarity, then this is your path. Subscribe to Stoic Advice for Men. This isn't a channel, it's a mindset shift. And we're just getting started.